From the heart of the Space City to the heart of Gen Z, welcome to Next Gen Conversation. Not Dad's Talk Radio. Ethan talks to you about the issues and events that matter to our generation. This is the Next Gen Report with Ethan Buchanan.
Hey, Happy New Year, everybody. And what a year it is going to be. I'm very excited for 2026. I think this is going to be a great year. Listen, I know there's a lot of naysayers, the Nicholas Fuentes types who will be upset with everything no matter what, and that's who these people are. They're people with no capacity for realism who do nothing but look for every available opportunity to be disappointed and then latch onto it and try to insist that you should be disappointed as well. I'm not disappointed. I'm very happy. I am very happy with the Trump administration. I'm very happy with the actions that we've seen. It's not perfect. Nothing will ever be perfect in the United States. No administration will ever be perfect. But I believe this absolutely is the best administration since probably George Washing Machine. And I'm happy. I am. I was going to talk a lot about some of the negative things, some of the, fraud that has been taking place in Minneapolis or, really all over the country. That's of course been a big story over the break. For 2 weeks, that's been leading the headlines. More and more fraud, more and more Somalians that have been taking advantage of America's openness, our good-hearted nature, the American taxpayer. Who knows what will happen with all of that? But I think instead we're going to have to spend a majority of the show talking about what we saw yesterday in Venezuela, which was phenomenal for the record. I mean, the comparisons with, operations to capture, Osama bin Laden, where we took years trying to capture that guy, versus we were able to capture Nicolas Maduro in less time than it would take to watch the Stranger Things season finale. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So let's jump into it. Donald Trump put out on Truth Social, the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. Details to follow. And then, of course, they had a news conference later. J.D. Vance reposted this, said the president offered multiple off-ramps, but was very clear throughout the process the drug trafficking must stop and the stolen oil must be returned to the United States. Maduro is the newest person to find out that President Trump means what he says. Kudos to our brave special operators who pulled off a truly impressive operation. And we'll get into the details of this operation over the course of the episode. I mean, I've got so much here that I'm going to share with you. I know I'm not going to have time for it, which is another reason why you should tune in to the podcast again on Wednesday, the Next Gen Report, wherever you get podcasts, or on X @ Ethan Buchanan. But this really was impressive, and this really was a good example of the United States reminding everybody around the entire world, but especially in our hemisphere, we are in charge. We are the big dog. You don't have to like it. You can say it's unfair. You can say, oh, it's not right of us to just exert our influence wherever we want. I would argue that it is our right because we are the biggest. We are the best. And we have the right and the capability to do what is in our best interests. I believe this is in our best interest. Removing Nicolas Maduro, I think, was in our interest. Anyway, let's dig into the actual details of the operation. This is from Donald Trump's press conference shortly after, and we'll play a bunch of clips of this because this was a very good press conference. But here he is basically saying what he said in that Truth Social post. We went in and we just torched them. Take a listen.
Late last night and early today, at my direction, the United States Armed Forces conducted an extraordinary military operation in the capital of Venezuela. Overwhelming American military power, air, land, and sea, was used to launch a spectacular assault, and it was an assault like people have not seen since World War II. It was a force against a heavily fortified military fortress in the heart of Caracas to bring outlaw dictator Nicolas Maduro to justice. This was one of the most stunning, effective, and powerful displays of American military might and competence in American history.
So there you go. I mean, we just ran in and took him. We literally just kicked his door in and grabbed the guy. And it's impressive. He said in the press conference, we didn't lose any aircraft. We didn't lose any assets. We didn't lose any soldiers. I believe a couple of people were hurt, but nobody died and no American assets were compromised. And again, I think the timeline was 30 to 45 minutes where we just hit Venezuela with everything, including the kitchen sink, and then stormed into Nicolas Maduro's house and grabbed him. It's impressive. It really is. And it's the kind of operation that you want to see more of. Again, this was justified. A lot of people are going to say, oh, this is just a war for oil, la-di-da-di-da, and that, I'm sure that's a part of it. I'm sure the Venezuelan oil was a factor. But what's also a factor is Nicolas Maduro is the head of a cartel. That cartel has directly, probably, and definitely indirectly killed American citizens. And he's running a nation that's on our borders, and he's bringing in abject enemies of the United States, like China, into our hemisphere. That is not good for us. That's not in our interest. It is in our interest to get that guy out. We'll detail that a little bit more in the next segment coming up, why exactly this was justified. It was an impressive operation, and it was justified. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about his alliances with BRICS, the indictment that he got from the DOJ, all of that coming up. But before we end out this segment, I just want to say, we are number one. America is number one. We are the greatest. It's not particularly close. All right, this is the Next Gen Report. I am Ethan Buchanan. We're going to be here till 8 o'clock, so stick around. If you're driving around, don't change the dial. If you're at home listening, get cozy. We'll be here for another 30 minutes or so, just talking about how much we owned Venezuela. We'll be right back. Okay, I don't know how they're doing it, but some folks are still managing to find ways to be upset about this. This amazing strike on Venezuela. And it is objectively amazing. It is. There's no denying that. What we did, quite literally overnight in Venezuela, was fantastic. It was fantastic. But nevertheless, the administration is going to have to defend it. They're going to have to defend it on two fronts. One, the legality. That's going to come primarily from the Democrats and the Thomas Massie types. They're going to be so upset that we used military action without Congress signing the paperwork. They're going to go on this whole rampage. They're going to rant to you about how unconstitutional it is. It's legal, all right? It just is. The United States of America, the president, is allowed as commander-in-chief to send in the military to do things. Congress has authorized that. I believe the specific rule is we have like 60 days in which an operation can be carried out before the president has to go and ask for a formal declaration of war or the extension of that 60-day time period. But the president is allowed to just send the military in to do things when those things are necessary. And this was clearly necessary. It's undeniable that this is necessary. Now, the other front that they're going to have to defend this on, and by they, I mean the Trump administration, is all the people that are go out and say that, oh, this is just another forever war. We're back in Afghanistan. This is the same thing. What happened to no new wars? I would submit to you that President Trump has earned a little bit of trust here. And also, I would submit to you that this is fundamentally different. This isn't some other war hundreds of thousands of miles away. This is on our doorstep. This is in our hemisphere. Venezuela is close to us. They are in our vicinity. They are in our direct sphere of influence. This isn't on the other side of the planet. This is in our backyard. This is the Western Hemisphere. We have to control the Western Hemisphere as just a matter of national security. We either have to control it or have people that are aligned with us controlling it. And Nicolas Maduro was neither of those things. He was not submitting to our demands, and he was not aligned with our interests. So we had to get him out just as a measure of national security. And even already, we're seeing this is fundamentally different from Afghanistan just in terms of how long it takes us to do things. President Trump got on Fox and Friends like first thing yesterday morning, right after the news of the attack broke, and he said this himself. Take a listen.
Compare this to Afghanistan, where we were a laughingstock all over the world. We're not a laughingstock anymore. No, we have the greatest military in the world by far. We have the greatest equipment, military equipment in the world by far. And you had to see this in real time. You had to see this, the professionalism and the bravery, everything about it. And you almost couldn't hold.
And he goes on and on talking about how great the troops are and how much they wanted to go in and how quick we did it. And again, he's right. It's impressive. All of this is impressive. Here's a good side-by-side. Vince Langman put this up on Twitter. George W. Bush needed 170,000 troops. That led to over 4,400 U.S. military casualties and an 8-year war in order to capture Saddam Hussein. President Trump captured Nicolas Maduro while we were sleeping overnight with 0 casualties. Now, of course, this picture on the right here, we now know to be a fake photo that was put out when the headlines broke. Here's the real picture. That's Nicolas Maduro on board the USS Iwo Jima, courtesy of Caroline Leavitt and Donald Trump. But again, I cannot stress this enough. Donald Trump did, in the span of one night, actually less than one night, what it took George W. Bush over 8 years to do. That's impressive. You can't deny that that's impressive. How are you going to look at that and say this is just like Afghanistan? It's not. It's not like any other war we've ever fought because we won it in 45 minutes. I mean, you gotta be impressed. You gotta be excited. This is awesome. We blew that entire country over and kidnapped their dictator in 45 minutes flat. Because we're the greatest. We're the GOAT. It cannot be denied. It cannot be denied. So listen, you can say this is another forever war. This is another regime change. We're just swapping dictators out. Be that as it may. But we've already, in the first day, I think, pretty positively proven that this is not going to be like the other forever wars. Because again, we did in one night with 0 casualties what it took George W. Bush 8 years and almost 4,500 American lives to do. I mean, you can be mad at that all you want. I think it's awesome. I do. Now, to the naysayers who will say, oh, this is illegal, we can't do this. J.D. Vance had a good response to this. PSA to everyone saying this was illegal. Maduro has multiple indictments in the United States for narco-terrorism. You don't get to avoid justice for drug trafficking in the United States because you live in a palace in Caracas. And that's a good point. Again, we hear this from the left all the time. No one is above the law. If no one is above the law, that means no one. All right? You guys said this. You, the left, said this. You don't get to complain now that we're enforcing our laws on a dictator and a cartel lord just because he happens to have set himself up as the dictator of Venezuela. That's not how this works. If no one's above the law, it's nobody. And here's AG Pam Bondi. Here's what she had to say about this. Again, I don't like AG Pam Bondi. I think she should be fired. But she did do a good job with just this one thing. Again, I still think she should be fired. Don't take this as me supporting AG Bondi. I don't like her. But here's what she had to say. Nicolas Maduro and his wife Cecilia Flores have been indicted in the Southern District of New York. Nicolas Maduro has been charged with narco-terrorism, conspiracy, cocaine importation, conspiracy, possession of machine guns and destructive devices, conspiracy to possess machine guns and destructive devices against the United States. They will soon face the full wrath of American justice on American soil in American courts. This is what every American who's interested in the strength and protection of the nation should want. We want our enemies to be subject to us, wherever they are. This is a good thing, no matter what side of the aisle you're on. If somebody's threatening the United States of America, you want the United States of America to be able to grab them by the ear and put them in timeout. On behalf of the entire U.S. Department of Justice, I would like to thank President Trump for having the courage to demand accountability on behalf of the American people, and a huge thank you to our brave military who conducted the incredible and highly successful mission to capture these two alleged international narco traffickers. This is a good thing. It is. Of course, where is it? Here's Thomas Massie. He's never happy. Pam Bondi put out the entire 25-page indictment against Maduro and his wife. Thomas Massie goes, the 25-page indictment has no mention of fentanyl or stolen oil. Search it for yourself. And he's right. There's no specific mention of fentanyl, but you know what there is a mention of? The introduction of the indictment cites former President Nicolas Maduro and his co-defendants corrupted once legitimate institutions to import tons of cocaine into the United States. Cocaine is a type of illicit drug. This is via a community note that I don't believe has been approved yet, or at least last I checked it hadn't been. But there it is. I mean, it may not be specifically fentanyl trafficking, but it is illicit drug trafficking. So are we going to sit here and say that drug trafficking is fine as long as it's not fentanyl? No, he's trafficking cocaine. Cocaine is dangerous. Cocaine kills Americans. Stop it. Stop him from doing that. By all means. Yes, and more of this. I don't understand how you can oppose this. Which is, I mean, as much as I want to like Thomas Massie, the fact that he has to constantly take the contrarian point of view on everything. I mean, at some point, you just have to do things, right? That's what we're seeing from this administration is the recognition that you just have to do things and we're going to do it because it's necessary. That's good. We got a lot more coming up. We'll be right back with more of the Next Gen Report in just a minute. All right. Once again, and I cannot stress this enough, because I've already, in the day and a half-ish since it happened, had to multiple times, even to my own friends, defend the legitimacy of this attack and the fact that it's in our interest. Taking Maduro out is in the interest of the United States of America. That's unpopular to say because we all have forever war fatigue, as we should. The forever war fatigue is legitimate. I'm not going to sit here and say it's completely unreasonable for somebody to sit there and think, oh, brother, we're going on another forever war. It is. Again, I think Donald Trump has, if you're an honest broker, earned some trust here. I think he's earned some trust. I think we've gotten to a point where we can trust this man to take actions that are in our interest. And I'll cite to you as an example, our attack in Iran. Remember, when we blew up Iran's nuclear facilities, a bunch of folks, the Nick Fuentes Groper types, swore up and down that we're going back to the sandbox for another 20 years. And then nothing happened. We bombed Iran's nuclear facilities into the dirt and then some, and nothing happened. That's ancient history now in the American political mind. Nobody cares that happened anymore. So I think this will be a lot like that. I think we'll probably maintain control of the country for a while. President Trump has said as much. We'll get into that in a minute. But I don't think this is going to be some constant war. I think this will be like Japan, where we take decisive action and then control the country for the next 50 years. That's what happened in the aftermath of World War II. We didn't have 50 years of people dying fighting insurgents in Japan because the Japanese people recognized, okay, we lost this war and it's in our interest to comply with the United States. That's what's happening in Venezuela. The Venezuelan people, and I'm sure we'll get into this as well, seem to be, from what I've seen so far, very happy about this. It wasn't like he was some beloved leader that was taken out and now we're going to have to go fight to control these people. They're happy. They wanted him gone. But all that is to say, it is in our interests to control Venezuela, and I'll prove it to you. We have this from BRICS News. Just in, Chinese officials arrive in Venezuela for talks with President Nicolas Maduro. This was the day before we kidnapped him. And I say kidnapped. The proper term would be arrested. But look, here's all these Chinese officials going, and somebody went and put them in bikinis. Thank you, Grok, for that. But here are all these pictures of Chinese officials going to meet with Nicolas Maduro and presumably cut deals with him and form alliances with him and bring the Chinese government into our sphere of influence, which is the Western Hemisphere. That is not in our interest. That is a threat. It is. We do not want China in the Western world, in the Western Hemisphere. That's a problem for us because I don't know if you know it, they don't like us. They are our enemy. They want to destroy us, destabilize us, and they will rally proxy wars if that's what they have to do in order to do it. So having the Chinese regime trying to make inroads with Nicolas Maduro, that's a problem. That in and of itself, I think, is reason to get rid of Nicolas Maduro because, again, this is not some abstract thing. This is in our backyard. This is in the Western Hemisphere. Now, on top of the kind of general geopolitical concerns that the Venezuela-China alliance could hypothetically pose, there's also the simple fact that Venezuela has stolen oil from us. They have stolen oil infrastructure from us. President Trump made this point a number of times in the press conference. I feel like it's worthwhile to kind of dig into that history. This is from AlJazeera.com. So, not an American outlet, not an outlet that has any interest in, making Donald Trump look good. But here it is, a kind of brief summary. In 1922, vast petroleum reserves were initially discovered by Royal Dutch Shell in Venezuela's Lake Maracaibo. I'm pronouncing that wrong, but who cares? In Zulia State in northwest Venezuela. At this point, the U.S. ramped up its investment in the extraction and development of Venezuelan oil reserves. So remember, this is before socialism in Venezuela. This is before the Maduro regime, before the Chavez regime. Companies such as Standard Oil led development under concession agreements, propelling Venezuela to a position as a key global supplier, especially for the U.S. So remember, U.S. companies started investing in Venezuela, pumping out their oil that we discovered, and then Venezuela got rich. Venezuela got rich. We were supplying oil. We had assets that belonged to American companies in Venezuela, all because of capitalistic free trade agreements. Our companies based in our nation cut deals with this nation, and everybody was winning here. We had a supply of oil. They had a ton of money. Venezuela was even a founding member of OPEC, joining at its creation on September 14th, 1960. And of course, OPEC is the group of major oil exporting countries. That began to wind up when Venezuela nationalized its oil industry in 1976 under then-President Carlos Andrés Pérez. Amid the oil boom, he established the state-owned Petróleos de Venezuela to control all oil resources, and then Venezuela continued to be a major oil exporter to the U.S. for some years, supplying 1.5 to 2 million barrels per day in the late 1990s and early 2000s. But after Hugo Chavez took office in 1998, he nationalized all oil assets, seized foreign-owned assets, restructured PDVSA, and prioritized global goals over exports, leading to declining production alongside mismanagement and underinvestment. So basically, American companies invested in this nation, and then this nation stole all their stuff and then stopped using it. That's why Venezuela is now a poor socialist nation. They can't even pump out the oil that we set up the systems to pump. I don't think that that's right. I don't think it's right that we allowed it then. I think that should be corrected. These are our companies, our citizens. Americans were making money off this, had livelihoods set up around this, and then it was stolen from them by a foreign nation that's now turning around and allying with our direct enemy, China. And then naysayers, even on the right, will say, oh no, we shouldn't go in and do a regime change. Yeah, we kind of should. Especially if we can do it quickly and easily, which what seems to be the case in Venezuela. We quickly and easily grabbed him, and now he's gone. Now he's out. I like this post. This is from Malmes Berryman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but like every nation in our hemisphere, Venezuela exists at the pleasure of the United States. We can arrest leaders of these countries at will. We have full freedom to operate in their territories. This is called the Monroe Doctrine, and it's 200-year-old international law. I think a lot of people have forgotten about this. And it's a good reminder. This action in Venezuela is a good reminder of the Monroe Doctrine. So what is the Monroe Doctrine? Here's a good AI overview from Google. The Monroe Doctrine, established by President James Monroe in 1823. So to all of you arguing about, oh, what about the UN? And oh, what about international law? The Monroe Doctrine predates all of that. So I don't care. The Monroe Doctrine, established by President James Monroe in 1823, was a U.S. foreign policy that warned European powers against further colonization or interference in the Americas, asserting that the Western Hemisphere as a separate sphere of influence. So basically, the Monroe Doctrine is, in summary, the Western Hemisphere belongs to us. We control it. You stay out. This is ours. We're here. This is our sphere of influence. This belongs to us. We are, whether you like it or not, the benevolent dictator of the entire Western Hemisphere. And we may allow other countries and other political entities, but at the end of the day, what serves our American interests is the law of the land in the Western Hemisphere. And as we have clearly demonstrated, we can and will enforce our will. And again, I cannot stress this enough. That is a good thing. That is in our interest. Our American companies making money off their oil, which, by the way, we had rights to from almost 100 years ago, is a good thing. Our American citizens being able to get those good oil jobs is a good thing. Our American citizens being able to have cheaper gas and cheaper energy because we're finally able to export the oil into the United States that we paid for 100 years ago is a good thing. I don't care what the naysayers say. I'm happy about this. You messed with the United States and you found out, Nicolas Maduro. Take note, every other country in the Western Hemisphere. We'll be right back. All right. Let's close this out real quick. I want to once again kind of hit back against this idea that, oh, we should never do anything like this. And I will again agree that we shouldn't make a habit of this. This should not be our first response. Arresting the dictator of a nation should not be plan A. Right? I think in his press conference, Donald Trump, as well as Marco Rubio and even Pete Hegseth, made it clear that we gave Nicolas Maduro every opportunity for this to not be the reality. We said, hey, you can just leave Venezuela. You can go somewhere else. We don't have to do it like this. Let's work something out. He didn't want to cut a deal. And we've seen time and time again that President Trump's go-to strategy is cut the deal. And if you can't cut the deal, then we're going to beat the hell out of you. It's carrot and the stick. He opts for the carrot first and then the stick. And I think that should be the plan. I don't like the idea of plan A always being regime change, but if that's the only option, that's the only option. And if we can do it efficiently like we just did, then by all means. By all means. But let's dig into this a little bit. I think Vince Dow really hit the nail on the head here. Whatever you think the real reason, quote unquote, is for toppling Maduro, I struggle to see any downsides. We removed a hostile actor on drugs and mass migration, Chinese influence destroyed in Latin America, cheaper oil and gas, BTFO'd a third world communist in the coolest way possible. Whatever faction of the right you're on, whatever your issue is, there is something for everyone. This is a massive win. The only people who are defeated are leftists, both the card-carrying ones and the leftists in spirit. I think this is right. I mean, he was a little harsh on the end. I think you can, in good faith, disagree with this. I just think you're wrong. But again, the bullet points he lays out are pretty clear. All of these things are in our interest. Getting rid of the Chinese influence, cheaper oil and gas. Now, again, this should not be option A, but if this is what we have to do to secure these bullet points, I think that's worthwhile. Now, there is some legitimate concern with what comes next. Are we going to have to expend a bunch of resources running Venezuela? And the simple fact of the matter is, we don't know what that's going to look like until it happens. Let's start with what Trump said is going to happen. We are going to be running the country either in practice or via a proxy regime for at least a small amount of time. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair price to pay for all of the, aforementioned benefits. But here is President Trump saying, at least for the time being, we're going to be running Venezuela in some way. Take a listen.
We are going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. And it has to be judicious because that's what we're all about. We want peace, liberty, and justice for the great people of Venezuela, and that includes many from Venezuela that are now living in the United States and want to go back to their country. It's their homeland. We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place.
Now, what does that actually look like? We don't exactly know because it hasn't happened yet. There hasn't been a big formal layout of, yes, here's the policy, here's who's going to be doing what. So we just don't know. I think demonizing this before we know what it's going to look like is not giving Trump his due credit. I think that's fair. I think, personally, President Trump can be trusted to do this in a way that's not going to expend more resources than necessary, not going to waste life unnecessarily. And I think we've seen that from him. It seems like, from what I can guess, just looking at the press conference, we're basically just going to be telling the new president, who was the vice president and has now been sworn in as the president of Venezuela, we're just going to be telling her what happens and she's going to do it. Here is, again, basically that being said in that press conference.
Rubio would be You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposition leader in your Fox and Friends interview. And then you also mentioned the vice president of Venezuela. Are you going to work with the vice president of Venezuela, or how do you foresee the relationship going?
I understand she was just sworn in, but she was, as you know, picked by Maduro. So Marco's working on that directly. Just had a conversation with her, and she's essentially willing to do what we think is necessary to make Venezuela great again. Very simple.
So it seems like we're now negotiating with a new entity, so we once again reset and go back to the carrot and the stick. Here's the carrot. Do what we tell you to do, and we'll leave you alone. Let us, reclaim some of our oil assets, reclaim the oil that we're owed, stop funneling drugs into our country, all of those things, and we'll leave you alone. And Marco Rubio spoke about his conversation with this new president. He says she's willing to comply. She's willing to do what we want. And so that's a good thing. If this is just us telling the Venezuelan government, you're going to do this, and then the Venezuelan government does it, I have no problem with that. I don't. I know a bunch of Republicans want to sit here and say, oh, this is bad. A bunch of kind of new age right-wing folks, even folks that I respect and admire, are saying, oh, this is a problem. I disagree. I think until we see this become an issue, it's not an issue. That's my take on this. Now, there's also something that can't be ignored, and that's the actual Venezuelan people. Again, they seem very happy about this, which is why I'm hesitant to say that this is going to be a forever war, because we're not dealing with a population that is super pissed off about us. We're dealing with a population that is very grateful. Take a listen to this lady talk about how happy she is. I believe she's a second-generation American who is the child of Venezuelans that fled Venezuela, came to the United States. Take a listen to her talking about this.
I came in this country when I was 10 years old, and ever since
she's first generation.
Every single person in power of the country has abused us and abused of their power. We have been living in a dictatorship for about 20 years. So I can tell you, this feels like a breath of fresh air.
And there's the Venezuelans in South Florida celebrating, cheering. And there's tons of videos like this online. The Venezuelan people seem largely to be very happy about this. And there's also the upside of, hey, all these Venezuelans that are in the United States can go back to their country now. If you want mass deportations and mass remigration, you should be happy about this. There's a lot of Venezuelans in this country, first and second generation, many of whom want to go back. I predict that we'll see a mass remigration of Venezuelans out of the United States back into Venezuela. That's a good thing. This is in our interest. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect. It probably won't. And I'm not saying there's no capacity for this to go wrong, because obviously there is. But right now, I'm seeing nothing but upsides. I'm sure we'll see downsides later. We'll take those in stride and we'll cross those bridges as we come to them. But right now, I'm pretty happy about this. And again, we'll have more to say about this, I'm sure, on the Wednesday show. So that's why you should follow the podcast. The Next Gen Report, wherever you get podcasts. We'll be back on Wednesday morning with more on this. Follow me on X as well at _Ethan Buchanan. We'll have more of this. TikTok, it's the same handle at _Ethan Buchanan. Reach out to me there. Let me know your thoughts. If you don't like this, by all means, tell me why. Let's have a discussion about it. But as of right now, I'm pretty happy. Hey, thank you very much for sticking with me this evening, listening to the Next Gen Report right here on AM 950 KPRC. We will see you Wednesday. Happy New Year.